I wanted to talk about this teacher that was recently jailed in Ireland in an ongoing row about using one of his students' preferred pronouns. And to my mind, it's a teacher's obligation not to reinforce the delusions of their students, to do what's best for them. And if you want to know what John Wheatley thinks of the meaning of an education, he's got an article here talking about exactly that. So check that out on the website.
I will say as well, that's interesting because you say students shouldn't have their delusions affirmed by the teachers. What we see a lot on libs of TikTok, for instance, now, is teachers trying to have their delusions affirmed for them by children. Because so many teachers now seem to be overgrown children in a permanent state of arrested development.
If you need your own beliefs validated by children, what does that say about you?
Or your sexuality, for some reason, why you would want to bring that up with kids, I don't know.
If you bring up your sexuality in a classroom, in my opinion, you should be fired on the spot. It's none of their business. It shouldn't even enter in your mind.
Very inappropriate behaviour.
So yes, in this story of this Irish teacher, there are a lot of potential questions about what you, the viewer, could do if confronted with wokeness in the workplace. And this is something that we actually get emailed about quite a lot, and I thought that it would be good to use this as a sort of case study to look at how best to deal with this sort of thing. And there's not a one-size-fits-all policy here that I'm going to give, but we're going to talk through it in such a way in which we can kind of tease out the important parts and what decision you should make, because this is something that we're going to come across eventually, and thankfully neither of us are going to come across this in our workplace. Obviously Carl's not going to fire us for being anti-woke.
No, of course
in fact,
not.
It'll be the other way around, I imagine. But many of you at home work in ordinary businesses where you don't get to control what the business environment is like. You might have diversity training, you might have diversity quotas, you might have people saying that you've got to adhere to certain things. You've got to wear, say, a Pride Month badge or a Black Lives Matter fist or something like that.
I don't know about you, but I certainly, for one, when I was working in call centres, have worked for the kinds of faceless managerial corporations where they do have the middle managers constantly with big bright smiles on their face with the dead eyes that will tell you to do things for the benefit of the company, and if you question them, that's all of a sudden they'll keep smiling, but the dead eyes will suddenly turn into very angry eyes because they're not used to being questioned in such a way. And you can get persecuted for your beliefs, for your opinions, and in many of these companies you can get persecuted just for showing up 5 minutes late because the traffic was bad. So,
and we've had many people tell us and email in or say on gold tier Zoom calls about either getting called into disciplinaries, getting fired, or getting overlooked for promotions, things as innocuous as that, because they challenge these sorts of things. So,
or even just because they posted something on social media.
So with all of that out of the way, let's have a look at the case of this teacher. So I'm going to read from a Daily Mail article and read from it quite extensively. So it's titled, "I love my school, but I'm here today because I would not call a boy a girl. Teacher who refused to use students' gender-neutral pronouns condemns insanity as he is jailed in Ireland." So I've reordered the article because I don't think it was written in a very good way, and I've made it a bit more chronological.
You want something to flow a bit better,
yes.
Yeah.
So the dispute began over his refusal to address a transitioning student as they rather than he, as requested by the student and their parents in May, and agreed to by the Church of Ireland school.
That's ridiculous that it's a church school as well.
It's probably a Catholic institution as well. Although given the state of their Pope, no wonder they've lost the guidance of God. This escalated to his suspension on the day before the start of the autumn term, pending the outcome of a disciplinary process, which is already pretty egregious. He had refused to remain away from the school on paid leave for that suspension, the court heard, and would sit in an empty classroom declaring that he was there to work. Enoch Burke was arrested yesterday morning for breaching, this is 2 days ago now, for breaching a court order not to teach at his Westmeath school or be physically present there. After Judge Michael Quinn made his ruling, Mr. Burke said, "It is insanity. I will be led from this courtroom to a place of incarceration, but I will not give up my Christian beliefs." Which
Absolutely,
is fair enough.
rightfully so. Is this not persecution based on religious beliefs?
Of course it is.
You would expect Ireland, of all places, to be very supportive of this man?
Well, apparently not. So it carries on to say, Counsel for Wilson's Hospital School Board of Management said It was with a heavy heart that it sought Mr. Burke's committal to prison, but she said her client had been left with no choice as Mr. Burke continued to attend the school despite the court order which it had obtained last week. So this is, obviously, he's not been sent to prison for refusing to adhere to the pronouns specifically, although that's the thing that started it off. It's for a contempt of court charge.
You know, this man is a teacher and evidently a professional who just wants to teach his kids and sort of help them to learn. Absolutely fine. He has been blocked from doing so because of personal beliefs that conflict against the absurd ideology that the schools and everywhere else, all the other institutions, are adhering to. So as far as I can see, this is, you know, de facto, it may be because of contempt of court or trespassing or something, but de jure, it's absolutely because he refused to say the pronouns.
Of course, yeah.
If they could get away with having it be as blatant in law, to be able to say if you refuse to use the pronouns, you're going straight to prison, they absolutely would. They just know that as far as the temperature goes right now, they just can't do that.
I'm pretty sure Jordan Peterson said a similar thing about Bill C-16.
Yes.
That he said it won't be on a charge to adhere to the pronouns, it'll be on a contempt of court charge.
I think
which he said in 2016, and now
it's gone all the way to Ireland.
Yes.
I mean, I think Peterson's point was when they said, oh, if you won't get arrested for not using the pronouns, you'll just get fined. And then he asked, what happens when I don't pay the fine?
Yes.
You go to prison.
But so far, this guy showed all the qualities of a good teacher in my books. I don't know whether he is a good teacher, but he seems to have views. He seems determined to teach the children. I mean, he was put on a cushy suspension where he had paid leave and he could just sit at home and put his feet up. But he didn't want to do that, which is the amount of dedication you want to see from a teacher, right?
Clearly a protest.
So Mr. Burke told Judge Quinn, I am a teacher and I don't want to go to prison. I want to be in my classroom today. That's where I was this morning when I was arrested. He said he loved his students to whom he teaches German, history and politics, as well as debating. I love my school with its motto, res non verba, actions not words, but I am here today because I said I would not call a boy a girl. He added, transgenderism is against my Christian beliefs. It is contrary to the scriptures, contrary to the ethos of the Church of Ireland and of my school, which he is 100% right about. Referring to his suspension, Mr. Burke said, it is extraordinary and reprehensible that someone's religious beliefs on this matter could ever be taken as grounds for an allegation of misconduct. My religious beliefs are not misconduct. They are not gross misconduct. They never will be. They are dear to me. I will never deny them and never betray them. And I will never bow to an order that would require me to do so. It is just not possible for me to do that, which is some great resolve, and I like to see this sort of conviction.
Yeah, I think that's actually quite inspirational to hear, to stand up against it and be so steadfast.
He described his suspension as unreasonable, unjust and unfair. He added, there has been a dumbing down of the seriousness of suspension. It is a serious step. It has tarnished my good character and my good name, particularly in the profession of a teacher, where one is so close to a large number of members of the local community. It leaves a stain on what has been, for me, an unblemished teaching record. Mr. Burke said he had a wonderful relationship with his pupils who knew him as a man of professed morals and convictions. He asked how he could return to the school and bow to something he believed to be manifestly wrong, which he also described as a violation of my conscience. Mr. Burke told the court that he believed that around this country teachers are being forced to participate, they're being forced to use the pronouns they instead of he or she, which I don't doubt for a second. It's clear that that's happening because it's happening to him.
If you wanted to, in fact, you could actually see this as the old religion and the new religion getting into a bit of a spat with one another. This is a man who steadfastly believes in the old religion, the one that believes in traditional morals, the one that believes in certain aspects of reality that cannot be changed, whereas the new religion is one of completely mutable characteristics of human beings where everybody's just made of jello, basically, and you just be formed into whatever they want, and that's not how it works, sorry.
Rosemary Ballon, BL, for the Board of Management, told Judge Michael Quinn that her client had no choice but to ask the court to send Burke to prison for a breach of a court order. It is a coercive order we are seeking, not a punitive order. We are simply seeking to have Mr. Burke comply with the order. Mr. Burke is knowingly in breach of this order. He is therefore in contempt and has made it clear that he is not committed to prison. He will attend the school today, and the concerns of the school regarding the ongoing disruption to the students remain, she added. She noted that Mr. Burke could make his arguments at court tomorrow when he The injunction obtained last week is due to be reviewed, and at the school's disciplinary hearing this month, Judge Quinn said he was not ruling on the merits of Mr. Burke's arguments regarding his religious belief or his suspension, but merely on the question of whether there had been a willful breach of a court order. He said that Mr. Burke could purge his contempt at any stage by agreeing to the order not to attend the school or attempt to teach there. So that's where I'm going to stop reading from this article. So I've seen countless scenarios whereby ordinary people have been confronted with wokeness, and we get plenty of emails, as I alluded to earlier, about what to do. There are mainly two questions that get asked. Do I keep my head down and avoid getting fired and continue to provide for my family? Which is a fair question, I think. If you fall on your sword, that's somewhat of a self-indulgent decision if you've got people to provide for. Obviously, it's a difficult one. I'm not siding on either side because, of course, the second question is, or do I stand up for my beliefs and push back against them? And I mean, me in the thing that I do, I'm willing to stand up for my beliefs, but then I don't have people dependent on me.
Well, I believe the actual question is, are you going to bow down for the short term or stand up for the long term? Because yes, if you stand up against these things, they will have consequences now that will potentially impact your family, which is obviously going to be very difficult for any individual to do. But we do also have to consider what kind of society we live in that is that our kids are going to have to engage in and interact with as they grow older. Are you going to worry about how you're going to feed your kids now if you get fired, any potential financial troubles that you might go through, or 10, 12 years from now, are you going to worry about your kids getting transitioned by teachers who hate you and everything you believe in? And I think in the long term, for everybody's benefit, it would be better if we all stood up now. Because at the end of the day, one of these things is going to get you.
That is the side that I kind of err on, but I don't want to make like a blanket statement about everyone's individual circumstances, because I think people should judge it case by case, because for some people, you could, for example, be in a small town and you work in a niche industry, and if you get fired from that one employer, then that's it. You can't really work anywhere else.
I mean, the problem with that for me is, once again, I think that whether you bow down now, sooner or later, because as we've seen with the progressivism, it's always developing, there's always new stipulations added to what's okay to say and what's not okay to say, something will get you eventually. Oren McIntyre had a fantastic Substack article about this, where his clown world is a uniform. People don't necessarily actually have sincere beliefs in these things, but you wear the aesthetic, you wear the slogans as a uniform to show that you're on side. And eventually it gets to the point where even for normal people, those who might be trying to keep their head down in organisations, will butt up against something that they can't stand by. For instance, for a lot of people, it has turned into transitioning kids. That's where a lot of people draw the line. And the second that you say, I don't stand by this, you get this treatment.
Sure.
And it's going to happen to most people eventually.
Like I said, I do err on the side of standing up for what you believe. However, there are practical concerns that I think
Of course.
a lot of political commentators won't talk about. Like, sure, it's good and emotionally satisfying to live up to your ideals, but you have a moral obligation to provide for your family, and you need to consider that as well, and that's very important. So I wouldn't rush into any decision. I would certainly talk to your significant other before making a decision like that that's going to affect your family.
Get your finances in order at the very least.
Exactly, yes. And think about things in those terms, because I think that that's very important. However, if you have no dependents and you are willing to risk losing your job, go for it. I would do that personally. Like, if I were in a different job where standing up for my beliefs would mean I'd be fired, well, I'd be like, well, fire me then. I can always find another job. It's not that important. My integrity is worth more than the money you pay me. So,
absolutely. Being able to look yourself in the eye.
But then I can also understand why people who have a family are a bit more cautious about this sort of thing, because that is also something that you're morally obligated to safeguard and protect. And if you don't have any other alternative, if you lose your job, then they're going to fall on hard times. There's no doubt about it.
Sadly, this is a situation that a lot of us have been pushed into by the sort of atomization of communities. The fact that we all have to live up to these globalist ideals and such, and people have to move so far away from friends and family, means that if you are in this situation, you may not have a proper support network to lean back on if you fall into hard times like people might have used to when communities were a little bit more coherent. If you know your neighbour well enough, they might actually help you out a little bit if you find yourself in a spot of bother. That's something that's dying out.
It certainly is, and it's a real shame. So let's talk about what this guy actually did right. So I certainly commend him for standing up for what he believes. It's a very brave thing to do, and I appreciate someone standing by their moral convictions. I like that he refuses to go along with things. I like that he's doing what's best for the children under his care in not reinforcing their delusions. I think this is exactly what a teacher should do. However, he could have quit his job after his suspension and used the recognition that he got from the media coverage to launch some sort of campaign into pressuring the schools and others to change, but instead he got needlessly dragged into court and sent to prison. And I feel like he's squandering an opportunity there where he could have had a public profile to fight it, and he's going down as a martyr instead. And I think that he's going to end up being replaced by someone in the school who's almost certainly going to be a gender ideologue, because the school will want to cover its behind.
Sadly, you are probably right in the consequences there, but I would still say that in all likelihood, this is the way that he could make the biggest splash, by making a political martyr of himself and doing this obvious protest, because all of a sudden it's on the front page of the Daily Mail. We're talking about it. Other people on Twitter and other social media are talking about it. His name is getting out there because of this in a way that I don't think would have happened if he had just tried to organise a group to protest against it.
It is entirely possible. I mean, I'm not particularly strong, as I said before. It's such a difficult thing to judge that it's difficult to come down conclusively on either side.
I still think that protest groups could be formed off of the back of this. Who knows how long he's going to be in jail for? He could get out, and now that his name is a bigger profile, then he could do what you're talking about.
Yes. And he could have also sued them, which
that's true,
is a very good method, because here we have an article. This is from the United States. Kansas middle school teacher who was suspended for reportedly misgendering student gets $95,000 payout from district in lawsuit settlement. So I feel like this is the ideal situation. I don't know about you, but nearly $100,000 would make
it would take the sting off the suspension, wouldn't it?
It certainly would, and this certainly causes a splash, because when people can smell money, it's like, maybe if I misgender my students, I can get a nice fat payout.
If we all just start insulting the trans kids,
There's a lot of money in it, apparently.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of what took Tavistock down, as far as I'm aware, was the
lawsuits,
hundreds of lawsuits that are being thrown in their direction right now. So,
however, it can also go badly wrong as well. And although this is a slightly different circumstance, it shows the extremity in which this sort of situation can go wrong. So in this Daily Mail article here, teacher who showed his pupils a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad is still in hiding a year after fleeing his home due to death threats. So this teacher definitely did the right thing. It was in a religious education class. He was specifically talking about religious offence, and he showed the Danish cartoon, I think, which got lots of pushback from Muslims in an educational setting where he's saying, this is what Muslims found offensive, this image here. I mean, that's fine. You should be able to show people. This is in Britain. We're not a Muslim country yet. We should be able to offend Islam without any punishment, certainly not having to flee your home, your work, your life due to death threats. That's unacceptable.
Historically, we've done worse than just offend them, and they've done worse to us back. So,
well, don't give me any ideas.
Deus vult, my friend. No, I think what this is the distinction and big difference that we can all see between a country with free speech laws and a country that doesn't have free speech laws.
But obviously, everything is context dependent. Hopefully, the way in which we've talked about these few cases helps inform your decision if you're ever confronted about this. And I'm very interested to see in the comments what you actually have to say about your own situations, because I do feel very sorry for a lot of you at home that all of this stuff is going on and you're not safeguarded like me and Harry by a boss who understands how all of this is going. So, I mean, I've been in that position before. I hope your boss is based.
Yes. But sadly, we know that most of them aren't. And especially if you're having to answer to middle management, you're probably going to be dealing with literally some of the worst people who've ever existed.
And I mean, if you want any advice, I'm willing to give it, although don't take it with a pinch of salt, because I'm probably not the best person to ask, but I'm happy to give it just because I want to help you out, basically.
Hopefully the clearest answer we've given in this segment is that you've got a much better chance of surviving if you're in America than you do in England regarding this stuff.
But anyway, to kind of sum up, that Irish teacher, in my opinion, is still a hero, even if his methods might not be as clearly beneficial to his own cause. I really hope that he gets a good end result, because he seems like a man of moral conviction who we should be supporting.
Absolutely.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as this article from Daisy on what a woman isn't. And if you want to follow what else we're putting out, you can follow us on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.